Welcome to everybody to this webinar where we will talk about the 6 leadership styles that will make you a well-rounded and effective project leader. I would like to start with the beginning. Why do projects continue to fail? And I ask this question because if all projects were delivered on time, to cost, to budget, if all projects delivered their benefits, then we could also assume that our leadership would be perfect. Hence, there would be no reason to discuss it. But that's not the case, and I think we all know that. On the right-hand side here, you see just 2 of the statistics that have come out of the PMI. In case you want to look at failure statistics, you can look at PMI's pulse reports. They publish really good pulse, so what's happening right now in the industry. 40% of strategic initiatives continue to fail. 48% of projects are not delivered on time. These statistics change a little bit, but they don't change massively. So what is going on? We continue to train more people in PMP and in project management methods. So why do we continue to see project failure? Well, one of the reasons that I emphasize is that we have growing complexity. We can all observe it by looking around. We have increasing social unrest in the world. We have a world that's interconnected. If something happens on the other side of the world, we feel it instantly. We have increased technological change. Every day, new technology comes out. We have projects that are larger than before. We have project teams that are bigger than before. We have people working from different time zones, different cultures. And if there's one thing that can make projects more complex, it's the number of people who we interface with. So all of this complexity means that it's harder for us to lead projects. It means that the old-fashioned ways, or not the old-fashioned ways, but in the old days, it could be enough when a project manager really used their own intelligence and all their own knowledge. They could lead a project based on their own knowledge. But that time is over because there is so much happening in the world. There is so much change all the time. It is no longer possible for one person to have all the answers. And this is why leadership is becoming more and more important. We simply need the team to help us navigate the projects, to help us make decisions, to help us stay current with everything that is happening, to help us navigate and adapt to the changes that are inevitable during the life cycle of a project. So I hope this brief introduction sets the stage for why leadership is important. And I'm not the only one who talks about the importance of leadership. I was very interested when I saw McKinsey & Company publish a report called The Art of Project Leadership, Delivering the World's Largest Projects. You can Google that and you can find the report for yourself. What you can see here is that irrespective of the project size and complexity, we have this gray part. Every project needs the foundation. That's the methodology, the systems, the processes. However, as a project continues to grow in size and complexity, we need relatively more of the green part here, the blue part here on the slide, what they call mindset. And the next slide shows a little bit more what this blue part is broken down into. The blue part they call the missing piece of the puzzle, the art of leadership. It's leadership, it's collaboration, trust, mindset, ownership, and coaching. And I agree, that is also what I call leadership. The other part, the gray part, that's what every project needs as a foundation. It's the processes and the planning and the risk management and the cost and the scheduling. We need that. However, in this time with growing complexity, we need more and more leadership. So let's turn our gaze now to these 6 leadership styles. These 6 styles I'm going to share with you are not invented by me. They're actually from Daniel Goleman. So Daniel Goleman is one of the fathers of emotional intelligence. He is widely published out there. You can look him up. And he talks about these 6 leadership styles. He's not the only one, but he's one of the main people who speaks exactly about these 6 ones. And before I go through them, I want you to know that there is a time and a place for each style. Every person is different on a team. Every situation is different. So the mix of leadership styles that we use with one particular person needs to change. You can mix and match these styles. You can even mix and match the styles within a single conversation. So let's look at what they are. The first one is the visionary style. And this is probably one of the styles we think of most intuitively when we think of leadership. It is that person who says, I know where we're going, come with me, it would be great. And they can sell sand in Sahara, as we say. They're great salespeople, because what happens when we use the visionary style is that we convey to the team where we are currently, where we need to go, and we bridge the gap between where we are now and where we need to go. So I often think of somebody like Richard Branson, the owner of the Virgin Group, when I think of the visionary style. Richard Branson is not somebody who leads somebody in detail, but he's very good at being visionary. And you might think to yourself, yeah, but I'm not Richard Branson. I'm running a small IT project. So do I really need to be visionary on my project? And I would say all project managers need to use this visionary style at times, because every project has a reason for being there. There is a benefit to be added from each project. And it's that benefit that people working on the project need to understand. So in times when the project isn't going very well, when we've had a setback, or even when we're just starting up the project, we really need to connect the people on the team with that bigger vision. Why are we here? Why does this project matter? And in those circumstances, it is super important that you are able to inspire your team and tell them why we are here and why they matter. The next style is the coaching style. This is a style which is fundamentally very different to the visionary style. With the visionary style, you are in front of the group. You're kind of leading from the front, saying, hey, come with me, come this way. With the coaching style, you are leading from behind. You are not the front runner. You are the one who is standing behind the team. You've got their back. Your main role when you use the coaching style as a leadership style is that you are helping to unlock other people's potential. You're saying to your team members, I believe in you. I want you to take the steps. I want you to make the decisions. We can discuss them between us. I can coach you, but I want you to be out there in front. I want you to grow. And the main reason that we use the coaching style is through questions. Instead of telling people what to do, we ask insightful questions that help people to make up their own minds, that help people to find their own solutions. We will dive a little deeper into the coaching style later on in this presentation. The third style is the democratic style. This is an interesting style because research shows that we don't actually get the best decisions when we use a democratic style. So if you are in a situation where you have a technical problem and you need to find the right way forward, using the democratic style may not be the best option, because with democratic style, you effectively take a step back as a leader and you're saying, what shall we do? So you're emphasizing that we as a group need to agree. So the times when it is very effective to use this style is when the outcome doesn't matter so much. But what matters is that you stand together as a group and that you have consensus on your way forward. Let me give you an example. For instance, when you start up a project, it's very important that you agree between you and the team, how are we going to work together? What tools are we going to use? Which meetings are we going to have, etc., etc. There isn't really a right or a wrong here. What matters is that you as a team come to an agreement on how to work together, what tools to use, and how to communicate with each other. So that's a really good example of when it would be beneficial to use the democratic style. Let me briefly go back to the coaching style, because what I want to also say with the coaching style, when it is effective to use it, is in particular when you're working with a team that is very competent. If you're working with a group of graduates, you can coach them, but it will have certain limitations, because if you're working with people who are more junior, they might need a little bit more direction. Coaching style is a very autonomous style, really, where you have this light way of guiding your team because they really have the answers. Now, it's very effective with people who are highly skilled, but perhaps lack a bit of confidence. Let's move to the fourth style, the affiliative style. This is a very heart-based style, as you can see from the heart I have used here. It is a leadership style which emphasizes the importance of providing harmony in the team. So it's a style which isn't so outcome-oriented, but it's really focused on making people and the team members feel good in the team. And you can say, well, when is that ever effective? You know, does a leader not need to be focused on the outcomes and outputs of the project? Yes, they do. However, in certain times when emotions are running high, when there is a high degree of uncertainty in the team, the leader needs to use a very affiliative style. Imagine, for instance, that there are redundancies in your organization and you feel really uncertain about what that's going to do to you and how it would impact your own role. Or imagine a time when there's something else going on that causes uncertainty. You know, your client has just changed the scope of the project dramatically, or you don't know if your project is going to be closed down. In those times, if you come in as a leader or project manager and you just tell people what to do, or you are very output or outcome oriented, people are not going to respond to you very well because they're not able to think clearly. So the first thing you need to do is to relate to them at an emotional level. How are you feeling? Let's talk about how this is impacting you. Once you've got the feelings out on the table, then you are able to move forward with more rational decisions or rational conversations. Remember, none of these styles stand alone. You can combine these styles. So we're not saying that you are only ever affiliative or you're only ever democratic. These are styles that you can use in individual conversations. The fifth style is the pace setting. Now, I once worked for an American investment bank in London, and they always prided themselves by saying, the predominant style in our company is the pace setting. And yes, it was. I could see it. The pace setting style is one that is very predominant in organizations with a technical angle. And you might say an investment bank isn't very technical, but there is a lot of technology in investment banks. So basically, it's a style which is widely used when somebody uses this style. It's when the leader says, I know the answers. I know the answers. I just want you to copy me because I know how to get things done. So imagine this super engineer, software engineer or otherwise, who is super good at his or her job, knows all the answers, knows how to get things done, will set the pace, and he or she will expect the team to follow that standard. So when is that effective, this style? Well, it is effective when you're leading a team that requires some standards and that, frankly speaking, whose standards need to be raised. It can be very effective for a short amount of time. But the danger is when we overuse this style, when we have a pace-setting leader for a long period of time, it wears out the team because there is no space for the team's good ideas. This is a style which, instead of unlocking potential and growing other people, it can really diminish others if used too much. The last style is the directive style. So this is more like the old-fashioned command and control. Do as I tell you, or else. And yeah, in many organizations, the style really has no place anymore because employees want to be led in a different way. They don't want to just be told what to do. But as all the styles, there is a time and a place when the directive style is appropriate. For instance, when you're working with very junior people who really do need some direction, sometimes we just want the answers. It is also a style which is recommended in times of crisis, when the stakes are high. We don't have time for coaching. We don't have time for democratic or affiliative. And it's not a time to be visionary, perhaps. We just need to get the crisis resolved. And it's time for the general to give orders. The problem, though, is that it can often be misused and it can be overused because there is always a crisis in an organization. So the trick is to use the directive style sparingly, but to use it well when it is required. This slide really gives a summary. So there is nothing on this slide, I think, that I haven't already said, but it summarizes everything. So you might want to take a screen grab of this particular slide and refer back to it later if you find that helpful. It just lays out what the main ethos is of the different styles and when to use it. As I said before, there is a time and a place for all the styles. As people, we tend to have a preference. So you might have a preference for one or more of these styles. Or you may think that you are democratic, but in reality, you're not. I remember I went on a leadership program many, many years ago, and my self-assessment was that I was very democratic. And one of my colleagues said to me, yeah, you think you're democratic, don't you? And I was like, yes, I always ask people's advice. He said, yes, but you make the decision yourself. Whoa. So it's interesting to get feedback from others because the style you think you're using may not actually be the one that you are using. The trick is to be able to mix and match well. So to take a step back and become more conscious of what an effective style is with different people in different situations. It's also worth thinking about your natural style in terms of whether you are naturally more supportive as a person or whether you are naturally more challenging as a person. Those leaders who are very supportive, we could say that they use a lot of yin. Yin is traditionally seen as more feminine. We're good at listening and supporting and coaching and providing safety and stability. We're good at making people feel confident. We're good at empathizing, and we're good at building those relational capacities. When we are predominantly using our challenging side, our yang side, this is traditionally the more masculine side. We're good at challenging people, asking the difficult questions, holding people to account to what they said they were going to do. We want excellence, we want high standards, and we're using our very rational way of thinking. You see, most of us have a preference for either or of these. I think the art is to be able to be challenging and supportive at the same time. But you might ask yourself, which of these is more natural to you? If you're very supportive, you will find yourself more on the right-hand side here. If you're very challenging, you will find yourself on the upper part of this matrix. And interestingly, we can place some of these leadership styles on the matrix. So the directive and the pace-setting styles, they have a lot of challenge in them. They have a lot of yang in them. On the other side, we have the affiliative style, the heart-based style. Very people-oriented, very supporting. Then we have some styles that kind of mixes and uses a lot of both elements. And I would say that the coaching style really uses both elements at the same time. Because when we coach, we really are challenging in the way that we can agree with the person we are coaching. Well, what does good look like? What is the standard that we're going to deliver to here? And then we also saying in the same breath to our employee, how can I help you deliver to that standard? What do you need from me in order to deliver your tasks? So we can be challenging when we set the standard and supportive at the same time in giving the employee or the team member the support they need in order to achieve what they have set out to. And on this matrix, which is the same as the previous one, we can go into a little bit more depth and investigate what is it that happens when we don't mix and match. What is it that happens when we are rigid and only use a leadership style that is on the extremes? So for instance, if you are very supportive as a person, you're very people-oriented and you have a lot of yang and support in your approach, and you really have difficulties being challenging, your team could become complacent because they're never really challenged to deliver to a high standard, and you're not able to hold them to account. So that is going to be your development point. On the other hand, if you are naturally very demanding, challenging, you're naturally a pace setter, or you like to give direction, that will create stress in your team in the long run. Not in the short term, but in the long term, it will create stress. It will exhaust the team. If you're doing neither of those, you know, oh, I don't want to challenge people. Oh no, that's too much. Oh, I don't want to support people. Oh no, that's too much. I'm exaggerating, of course. But you will sit in this unattached or detached quadrant in the bottom left. I also call these Teflon managers. Ooh, nothing sticks on the pan. You know, they just they move things on to somebody else. That is not a good leadership style. I think that's like somebody who is not there at all. I think the best area to be in, as a general rule of thumb, is to be doing both at the same time. People perform best if they are supported and challenged at the same time. Of course, we need to use the full breadth of the spectrum. There are times when you're working with a very young person who has a lot of confidence, and they just need you to set the standard for them. You can be a bit of a pace setter with them. At other times, there is a demand for you to be very supportive with somebody who maybe has lost their confidence. So different situations demand different styles from you. Having said that, in many cases, and in most cases, you get the best results by being both challenging and supportive at the same time. That's this top right-hand quadrant. And I want to hone in on this coaching style because coaching has the ability to both support and challenge at the same time. And I want to highlight Liz Wiseman, the author of The Multipliers, a leadership book called The Multipliers. She really advocates for the coaching style as a leadership style as well. In her book, she distinguishes between diminishers and multipliers. Diminishers, to her mind, are those people or leaders who diminish their team. So they make people feel dumber than they are, and they actually get less out of the team. That's because they believe that they're the smartest person in the room. They take all the credit. They like to hear themselves talk. So really, it's leaders who are very self-centered. Multipliers, however, are those leaders who get more out of other people. They multiply the smarts of others. You could say they unleash the team's best thinking, and they do that by coaching and teaching, not by telling. They create a safe environment, because if people feel safe, if we feel safe to contribute, then we will contribute. But if I, as a team member, fear that you're going to criticize me, that you're going to, dismiss me as my manager, then I'm not going to contribute anymore. So she creates this case for why we need to have a multiplier attitude as leaders. I also write much more about this in my own book. So how do we become a multiplier? Well, it's actually, a lot of it is through the coaching style. And the coaching style relies on questions. When you tell people what to do, you are elevating yourself and your own knowledge, and you are diminishing others. When you ask people questions, you are encouraging others to think for themselves. That's how we unleash other people's potential. That's how we help grow other people. So on the screen here, you see some questions you can ask in a team setting. These questions all make people think, especially those last two questions that begin with what if? What if we had no constraints on this project? What would we do differently? What if we could start all over? Try that on your projects. Try to ask more questions, more open questions, and experiment with the what if questions as well. In a one-on-one context, you might be asking another set of questions. Let's imagine you have a team member and your team member comes and asks you for advice. How can I do this? Or how should I do that? And you are tempted to give advice, but you have learned in a webinar that it could be giving you a better result if you ask questions. Because when you ask questions, you help the team member to think for themselves. So there are some examples of questions you can ask now on this slide. There's 3 steps. First, you are coaching the team member to understand what the problem is. Because if we don't understand the problem, we can't come up with a solution. And then you are asking them or guiding them to think through how they might resolve the problem. And lastly, you are encouraging them to take some action. So step number 1, these are some questions you can ask for step number 1, for understanding what the problem is and for helping the person you're coaching as a leader to understand what the problem is. What's on your mind? What do you feel is wrong? Could you tell me more about the issue? What's the real challenge? What does it look like when we have resolved the issue? So you see, these questions stimulate your team member to think through the problem themselves. And step number 2, once you know what the problem is, what have you already tried? What worked and what didn't work? What's holding you back? What can we do to change this? What else? You might not ask all of these questions at once, but it gives you an indication of the sort of line of questioning you can use. And lastly, once you have understood how you might resolve the issue, it's time for some action, of course. Because as a leader, you don't want to end up with all the action. You're trying to empower the team member. That's the leadership style here. You're empowering others. What action will you take? Which option would be the fastest or the easiest? What will you do right now? What's the first step and how can I help? So just to remind you that I'm homing in on the coaching style. Out of the 6 styles, I'm just homing in on the coaching style because that's one of the styles that allows you to both support and challenge a team member at the same time. And oftentimes that is what yields amazing results in terms of getting the best out of others. But all the 6 leadership styles have a place and a time that you need to use them. The visionary is very good to use when you're starting a project, when the team is disillusioned, when you've had a big change in a project, when people need to understand where we're going next. Democratic is very good to use when you need to build consensus in the team. Affiliative is very good to use when people feel upset and then they just need to feel listened to and they need to get their emotions processed. Pace setting is very good to use when the team standards are low. And lastly, the directive style is very good to use when you're in a crisis situation, when people just need a quick answer. Overall, however, the coaching style has a lot to offer. Don't use it with people who are so junior that they can't answer any of these questions. But in many situations, you will get very, very far with a coaching approach. So the elements that are important for coaching is for you to listen. Because what we're saying is that the coaching leadership style is a style where you don't just tell people what to do. You are listening and you're asking questions. So there are 3 ways of listening, or 3 levels of listening. One of them is level 1, internal listening. This is what we do most of the time. As somebody is speaking, you are listening to your own internal dialogue. So as I am speaking now, you might be thinking, oh yeah, okay, what should I ask some questions, or how does this relate to my own project, or oh, I wonder what to have for lunch today. We do this all the time. We listen to our own internal dialogue as we are also trying to listen to somebody else. When you are leading your team and when you try to coach somebody, that is not the best way to engage. What's a much better way is level 2. Here you are focused. You focus on the other person. You are really listening to everything they're saying. You're not listening to your own mind chatter. And that means you can better respond to the team member. However, there is an even higher level of listening, and that's level 3, global listening. This is where not only do you listen with your ears, it's like your skin is listening. It's like you're listening with your intuition. You're so focused on the other person that you also pick up on the things they're not saying and what they might be feeling right now. So I think it goes without saying that if you really want to lead your team well and to use the coaching style well, and even to tune in and notice what style is the best one to use in any given moment, it's very powerful to switch off your own mind chatter and just listen to the team member. Then oftentimes intuitively you can respond in the most appropriate way. It's very powerful as a leader when you ask what and how. What is going on? What do you worry about? How could we do this differently? Instead of asking why. Why did you do that? Why do you think so? Because if you ask why a lot as a leader, people might feel a bit defensive. They might feel they have to justify their actions to you. So if you really want to know why they've done something, you can ask in a different way. You can ask, oh, that's interesting. What led you to do that? Or what were your thoughts at the time? But asking why can be a very hard question. It's also very good when you're leading somebody, especially when you use the coaching style, to summarize what they're saying. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that we have a problem with the stakeholder. You've tried to speak to them. You haven't been able to get in touch with them. So you email them the different options. Is that right? Did I get that right? So you're trying to summarize back what they're saying. It's very powerful because it means that they know you've heard them and you're not making assumptions. You are showing that you're on the same page. And then I would just emphasize that if you want to grow your leadership and you want to grow your team, try to notice how much advice you're giving and try to limit the amount of advice you give. It's a great ego booster when we give advice. It's like Superman coming flying in and saying, I know how to do this. I know how to solve the day. I'm a technical expert. Just ask me. It's great for our ego, but it doesn't necessarily help other people to grow. It's far more empowering to ask questions. So that was my short and sweet walkthrough of the 6 leadership styles. We really welcome your questions. I also welcome that you connect with me. I am on LinkedIn, and I'm just reaching out here to grab a real copy of my book. This is The Power of Project Leadership, second edition. It is also translated to Chinese and to Polish if you happen to be fluent in those languages. It received a PMI award a few years back, just before the pandemic. So this is a book on the leadership aspects, not on project management, but on project leadership. It has the 6 leadership styles in there. It also talks to how to coach. It talks about psychological safety in a team and everything leadership of a team, basically. But you can read the reviews yourselves. So do connect with me on LinkedIn as well. On my website, you find a lot of information. And of course, as I said, on YouTube, there are lots of short videos.
Susanne, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for listening in. Have a great day.